Here's a number that should keep every transformation leader up at night. 70% of digital transformations fail. That's McKinsey, that's BCG, that's every consultancy firm for the last decade telling us the same thing. But here's the number nobody uses, DK. Bain's 2024 analysis says it's actually 88% when you measure against original ambitions, not adjusted goals, not the watered down version the board signed off after a year. The original plan. 88% failure. And every single report blames the same thing: resistance to change. The people on the floor won't adapt. Middle management is blocking. The culture is too rigid. But what if we're looking at it on the wrong floor? What if the resistance that kills digital transformation projects doesn't come from the people being asked to change? It comes from the people who approved the change.
Wow. The people who approved the change, those are the ones we're blaming right now.
We make mistakes.
We learn.
We grow.
We share.
Shamelessly.
This is Shameless Tuesdays,
The digital transformation podcast brought to you by Transformation Leader.
Well, hi, I'm Dzikamai Gangaidzo.
And I'm Nono Bokete.
And welcome to Shameless Tuesdays, the podcast where two digital transformation practitioners have the conversation that your corporate communications team would never approve. In fact, that nobody in your corporate structure would even dare to talk about. No guests today, just two of us, me and Nono and I. Two people who've been in the room where transformation falls apart, and we had to figure out why.
And today's question is one that every practitioner has asked, but no one answers honestly. Why do digital transformation projects fail before they even launch? Now, not why do they struggle, not why do they go over budget, why are they dead on arrival? And nobody realizes it until 6 months later and several millions of dollars have been spent.
And I'm going to start with a bit of a confession. Because
Okay.
I was part of one of those failures. I didn't see it coming. Honestly, I was like surprised.
Okay, surprise.
Surprise! And so let me tell you about a mining implementation I led. It was a big project, enterprise-wide, and the executive team had signed off unanimously. Full budget, steer committee, external consultants, everything you really wanted. 3 months in the project? Well, 3 months in, the project was technically on track, but nothing was moving. I really hate that feeling. Technically, it's all good, but then you're not really progressing as fast as you really want. Approvals that should take a day were taking 2 weeks. The people I needed in the workshops kept getting pulled out into other priorities. The steering committee meetings were from an hour to 20 minutes because, and I remember the exact words, there's nothing to escalate.
You know that's corporate for we stop caring about your your small little project, you and your little friends.
And that's the thing. It's like you're here wasting my time. It's like, well, there's nothing here for us to talk about. Exactly. But I didn't read it that way at the time. I actually thought, well, we're in a steady state. I was tracking my milestones, green across the board, but the team on the ground, the people actually doing the work, they knew. One of the project leads came to me and said, hey, DK, nobody is going to use this. You're wasting your time, mate. And I said, why? We have everything we need. We've got the executive sponsorship, full budget. We've got the right support. And she said, no, you have executive permission. That's not the same.
Have you seen this? This is a new way we clap now in 2020.
I'm not going to get into that. Don't even let me get into that. Hey, I'm here busy breaking down my failures. You're clapping. I hear busy clapping with the pinky. Anyways.
I love the distinction. I do, because it's exactly what the research shows. There's a study from MIT Pseudo Management Review that found that cultural resistance is the primary factor in transformation failure in over 90% of cases. And when they dug into what cultural resistance actually means, it wasn't people on the floor refusing to learn the new software. It was actually the leaders setting a tone that made resistance rational. So when she goes, you have executive permission, I really think about, fine, the executives approved the project, but they made every interaction with it slower, harder, less important. And they didn't resist openly, obviously, because they signed, you said that, you had enterprise approval, everything was green, but they did deprioritize it. And when leadership deprioritizes something, everyone with career survival instincts will follow.
And, the reason I didn't see it, I guess, is because I was looking for the wrong signals. At least in hindsight, it's easy to say that. I was looking for someone to stand up and say, I don't want this. Nobody said that. The CEO was the primary sponsor, but at the same time, and he didn't know it, but he was the biggest blocker. And he was the most enthusiastic person in every single meeting.
So what was he actually doing?
He was raising legitimate concerns: data security, compliance, risk assessment. He requested the key users to be consulted in every design decision. Well, quite frankly, I mean, the key users he selected were the people most invested in keeping the old system, right? I mean, they had no real reason why they would need to change or want to change. He created a governance structure so thorough that nothing could move without the sign-offs. On paper, it looked great. It looked great, good governance. But in practice, it was such a buzzkill or a kill switch.
I guess both in your instance. I think that, that feels like a governance trap. And I've seen it in financial services. I've seen it in telecoms. I've seen it pretty much everywhere. A leader who is threatened by transformation doesn't fight it, they govern it to death, because governance is the one weapon that nobody questions, right? And in neuroscience explains this. It happens unconsciously. So you're right to say that he unknowingly was the biggest blocker. Because when you approve a transformation, you're approving the dismantling of a system that made you successful. Your process, your power structures, your expertise. The brain treats threat to your professional identity the same way it treats physical threat. The same part of your brain responds, the same cortisol, the executive sign off with the rational brain. Yeah, we're happy. This is something we need to do. But then the resistance with the survival part of your brain that's like, this is scary. I don't want this. You're threatening me. And because they have organizational power, their resistance looks like leadership, basically.
And it's such an interesting idea, because when there's a problem in front of you and you follow a certain structure, you place all the textbook elements, then sometimes it looks perfect. It's like, this is how it's supposed to be. And even sometimes you're just trying to drive adoption. And quite frankly, to drive adoption can sometimes give you the opposite effect or impact, especially if you're not fixing an underlying problem. And quite frankly, I read something recently about loss aversion that made this click for me. And the name of it is something like Kahneman's work. We feel losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains, meaning that
That's deep.
If you lose something, it weighs that much harder and that much more. In fact, 2 times more. So when the CEO was weighing in, this system might make the company more efficient. Again, this system will definitely make my 20 years of supplier relationships less valuable. That loss was a way, way, way bigger weight and a much bigger problem for the end user to actually adopt.
Yeah, and I guess unless he's aware of it, that's the whole point, right? He's not a bad leader, or in this case, he wasn't a bad leader, and he wasn't sabotaging anything. It didn't sound like he was coming like in the back streets going, hey, yo, let's trample this project. I think he genuinely believed his concerns were legitimate. And that's what makes it so dangerous, because the resistance is actually invisible to the person doing it. So to your point where you go, I want someone to stand up and say, hi, I hate this. It's not going to happen.
And some of these projects, there's a time and a place, right? So possibly very early on into an adoption, you probably want to allow for a little bit more, and it might look a little less structured. When you get to a more mature state where you've got enough momentum, then you could possibly bring in those governance pieces. I mean, going back to this example, the project cost the company 18 months and significant money. And when it was finally killed, the Post-Mortem blamed the user resistance, the inadequate change management. The real cause, executive identity threat, was never named. Nobody ever came out and called the spade for what it is, because you can't put that in a board report. I can't blame them.
Yeah. So I guess the question we need to answer is, so why do they fail before they start? Why is digital transformation projects, killing getting killed. And based on everything we've seen, and I've led transformation across banking, telecoms, retail, even governments. And here's my take on this. They fail before they start because the conditions for failure are set in the sponsorship conversation. The moment a leader approves a transformation without honestly reckoning with what it will cost them personally, their control, their expertise advantage, their network power, the project is running on borrowed time. KPMG in 2024 found that 54% of employees feel unprepared for technology changes, but nobody measures the percentage of sponsors who are unprepared for the personal cost of what they're sponsoring. And I bet my reputation it's higher. What? I'm being serious.
I was like, your reputation is, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it does. It absolutely makes sense. But I would also like to add.
What? Are you trying to say I don't have a reputation?
I know you do. And I'm like, it is very fair. I don't know why you're feeling attacked. So I'd like to add a second reason, right? They fail because project teams are usually optimized for delivery. And not necessarily for navigating some of those, how can I call it, more tactical, more political situations. Right? And in quite a few, if not in quite a few of these different mining projects that I've been in, I believe I had probably the best technical team available. Great implementation partners, a solid methodology. Fine, sometimes the methodology was a bit cowboy gung-ho, but we had tried and tested it and we believed we could always execute. And none of it mattered because nobody on my team, including myself, had the skill to navigate what was happening at an executive level. We were trained to manage timelines, budgets, and risk. We were not trained to manage the CEO who was unconscious that he was killing a project while smiling in Steerco.
That sounds so like,
What?
yeah, like evil love when it's like it's not even that crazy. Well, as in it's crazy, but it's
It
not
was not. It was so
intentional.
crazy. It was so crazy. And, it's like one of these, there's a different book where the guy talks about the doctor unknowingly was poisoning his own patients. And that's only because of, well, I can't say it because it's part of this thing that you do in transformation leaders. So I'll leave that. But the doctor's poisoning his own patients. He did it unknowingly. And at the end of the day, you could have great intentions, but the results can be something that you never intended it for it to be.
Yeah. I'm going to come up with the third reason. And this is the one that I think makes me uncomfortable because it's something I also had to kind of come to after doing this for a while, is that most transformation leaders don't do their own inner work. So you're asking everyone else to change, your executives, the teams, the process, and this is fun for you even, right? You maybe get a high from this new thing you're bringing in. But have you honestly looked at what you are protecting? I'll share one of mine. I was leading a transformation in financial services, and I realized halfway through that I was unconsciously designing a new operating model to keep my role central. I was the one who understood both the old and the new system, and I was making myself a bottleneck because being a bottleneck felt like being important.
And look, I appreciate you sharing that. That's because I think every honest part of this discussion any honest practitioner has a version of that story. I mean, if you're going to be honest with yourself and you're practicing that, I'm sure that your story resonates with multiple people. For me, it was a different project where I kept insisting on a phased approach. Not because it was the right strategy, because a big bang approach would have exposed that my team wasn't as ready as I told them in the steering committee. Quite frankly, I was managing my own reputation.
So you have a reputation?
Oh, if I'd known that this was gonna come up, I would have definitely just kept quiet at that point when you talked about your reputation. But yes, I mean, but it makes sense, right? At the end of the day, that self-interest, that self-preservation, those things that, are you gonna shoot yourself in the foot? No. But you have to be very conscious that, and not necessarily have these self-interests without knowing. Number one. Number two, how do you then ensure that you don't find yourself in those positions? Because I think that's how you unknowingly end up killing a project.
Yeah.
Being able to stand up and say, look, guys, let's regroup. Let's try to get this launched by this date because my team will be up to speed. I mean, there's no harm in that, but perpetuating a lie probably leads you into a deeper hole.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why it maps to the leading self in the lift framework. It's not about mindset, right? It's about the specific skill of knowing what to do when your own doubt, your own ego, your own resistance, or in your case, reputation is on the line. So it doesn't become the program's resistance, right? Like, I think that's the difference. That's the difference between the two.
All right. So if someone's listening to this and they're about to start a transformation or they're in one that is stalling, what do they actually do? Let me share what I did differently or what I do differently now after all those multiple disasters. Firstly, is I map the personal stakes that before I start to map the technical requirements. So for every executive sponsor, every steering committee member, I ask one question. What does this person lose if this succeeds? Because this becomes a more personal conversation and a more personal threat that is not necessarily about the company, but it's about the person. If someone's career was built on being the person who knows how the legacy system works, they have no benefit. They've got no value add. They're not going to be the champion towards this new replacement. You have to give them a role in the future state that's at least as valuable as what they're about to lose.
This I know you don't like this, but because that flips the entire stakeholder analysis model, right? Most stakeholder mapping is like who supports this and who does what, and who's lying about supporting it, and which is as it's useful, but I feel like this is way more useful, right? Because you're going to the core of the emotion of survival brain, right? You're answering that. Because I think yes, I would actually I love this. I absolutely am literally going to go out and do this tomorrow.
So if you're going to go out and do this tomorrow, then let me give you a second one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Track decision velocity. I mean, and by that, I mean, measure how long approvals take as a leading indicator. When decisions that should take a day take 2 weeks, that's not process. That's definitely not a process. That's resisting wearing a suit. Sometimes something has to change, and something has to change. Usually it's political, and nobody's naming it.
I love that. I'm going to add a third around, nobody naming it. If you're a transformation leader and you're doing digital transformation, I say this a lot. I'll probably say this in every episode this year is you have to have the stomach for it, because you need to be able to have conversations that nobody wants to have. And you better have those things early before the project kicks off. Sit down with your sponsor one-on-one, no notes, and ask, what part of the transformation makes you personally uncomfortable? Most sponsors will say, nothing makes me uncomfortable. That's when you know you have a problem, because if someone is honest enough to name their discomfort, they're honest enough to manage it. And it's the one thing when you're like, oh, I don't have anything, I get nervous, right? Because if you have no skin in the game, that is where I'm like, are we safe? Are you gonna unknowingly sabotage this project, right? So you gotta have the stomach for those conversations.
And, that reminds me of a conversation I had with the CIO a couple of years ago. I asked him exactly that question, and he paused for, I don't know, about 30 seconds, which in corporate conversation is an eternity. You're like, we're looking at each other, eyeball to eyeballs. I could see the white of his eyes. You could see the white of my eyes. It was long. And then he said, if this works, my IT team halves in less than 3 years. And I said, including you? And he was like, especially me. That man became the biggest sponsor I've ever worked with because he'd named the thing. He could manage it instead of being managed by it.
Wow. Okay. Kudos to him. Especially
He's
the
a-
especially me part. I'm like,
Yeah.
what did you do in your face? Did you go, oh, cool? Or did you go,
No,
I
I
have a
was like,
bad face. I
I
can't, I'm
started
like, oh,
clapping. I was, yeah.
that's funny. Well, one other thing that you can look at, it comes from behavioral science, is to design for the transition, not just the end state. So most transformation plans describe where you are now and where you want to be. So think current state, future state. If you're in like, even business improvement, also like map out your current state and then think about what your future state is. And, imagine this amazing utopia. We just think that if we close our eyes, we're going to get to the future state. That's not true. Because almost none of them describe what is it going to feel like when we're now moving from our current state to our future state. What's happening in the middle? The confusion, the competence drop when people are learning a new system, which honestly, that to me, like personally, I hate learning new things. Like, so you have to relate to that. And the period where the old way doesn't work anymore and the new way doesn't work yet. So it's like, it's just crap all over. And William Bridges wrote about this a decade ago. The difference between change and transition. Change is an external event and transition is an internal psychological process. Most change management plans talk about the change, obviously, but almost none manage the transition. And it's the transition that kills people's willingness to continue.
So oh my gosh, that resonates so much because, and I'll use this example, or maybe I should say what I do now is I spend some time understanding the current, then I spend a little bit of time understanding the future, and then I go, I don't know what the future really is, but it'd be this direction. Then I spend all my time, the rest of it, the 90% of it, understanding that transitional state. And in the mining projects that I did, there was one in particular, a 3-month period where the old system was being decommissioned and a new one was being implemented, and that new one wasn't stable yet. Quite frankly, this was during a period where I was also moving from one site to another. So I get into this space, and that's the period where everyone felt the most vulnerable. There was a lot of expectation, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of intensity. And instead of acknowledging that and supporting people through it, there was a lot of pressure to keep pushing those milestones. There was a lot of pressure to keep treating it like a project management problem, when in reality, it was a human-led problem, where we had to bring the people up to a place where they could be comfortable, they could have the understanding, they could have a level of security around the changes there and see where they lay within this new ecosystem.
Yeah, I feel like that's really important because when you're now starting to push a project with just not caring about that transition, then you are obviously not going to be measuring the resistance. And I think that's the fifth thing you need to do. You need to measure the resistance and not just feel it like, oh, I feel like people don't like this. I use what I call a commitment audit. So every month I check, are the same people attending the same meetings? Is the language shifting from we will to we might? Are decisions being reopened that were already made? Are new stakeholders suddenly being added to review processes? Those are all measurable signals of resistance building. If you only rely on your gut, you spot it too late, the way DK did 4 months in, right?
Ouch. That is so unfair, but so accurate.
So let's land this. Why do digital transformation projects fail before they even launch? Because the leaders who approve them haven't reckoned with the transformation costs them personally, because the project teams are optimized for delivery, not for navigating executive politics. And because most transformation leaders haven't done the inner work to see their own resistance patterns. The 6-week power journey exists for the third one. It's not a project management course. It's not a change management certification. It's 12 practitioners spending 6 weeks developing the self-awareness to lead transformation without becoming the thing that blocks it. March cohort is open. Link is in the show notes.
And if you've been listening to this and you're in a project that is stalling right now, go back to those 5 things. Map the personal stakes, track the decision speed, have the uncomfortable conversations, plan for the transition, not the end state, and measure the resistance before it measures you. That's it for today. And thank you so much for listening.
Stay shameless. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.